Ghana, second quarter economic growth coming in at annualized 6.9%. Look at the median forecast from economists that were asked. They were expecting 3.3%. First quarter of the year was 4.8%. That was revised. Well, how did they do it? We spoke with Winston Tackie. He is, of course, a business analyst and a journalist from Accra. He shared his thoughts with us. He said he was pretty impressed.
Yes, I'm quite impressed by the performance in the second quarter, where we saw the growth of the economy recorded by 6.9% according to the latest data by the Ghana Statistical Service, which is a significant increase from the 4.7% we recorded in the first quarter of 2024. This growth is basically notable for looking at some of the sectors, basically the mining and quarrying contributing enormously to overall growth, recording a 9.3% in the sector. We saw the same reflection in the first quarter, where mining and quarrying still pushed the economy forward. But the sustainable factors, which has been key, is the government policy for gold for oil reserve, which was key championing of the sector, and also the conversation about galamsey. So the mining has increased since the latter part of 2023, going into 2024. So we've seen the sector hugely contributing, but whether it has realistic reflection of the kind of impact we want to see in the life of individuals, the life of the economy, apart from services sector, which also saw some marginal growth, and the agri sector, which some aspect of it saw contraction, and also we saw the construction sector also seeing some contraction there. Key sectors which should have been a ripple effect on the economy have not seen significant growth, especially if you take the services sector, for instance. We saw increase in telecommunication and communication sector there because of the government policy of the introduction of the electronic transaction levy, e-levy. So we saw a marginal increase there. And also there's been increase in service tax on telecommunication services and taxes on communication companies. So last year, going into the latter part of the year and also early part of 2024, we saw some key telecommunication companies recording enormous trillion of dollars in terms of profit. The growth in numbers is reflecting by the ripple effect on the environment, on livelihoods, on the citizens, is something that has become quite important, irrespective of the growth that has been recorded in the mining industry sector.
Now, you mentioned the CD. I think it's trading at about 15.7 to the US dollar. What's your outlook as far as the trajectory for the Ghanaian CD as we close out the year?
If you look at the current space, it has become quite stable between this week, where we've seen a marginal stability of the currency due to government's advancement of some of its key policy prospects. Going into the election season, we are still under the IMF program, so government is determined to stay prudent. Government is determined to ensure that we don't move against increase our debt stock. We don't indulge in election-related expenditure, which ripple effect is felt in the first quarter of the year after the election. The city stability will largely depend on several factors, including government policies, just as what I mentioned, and also the foreign exchange reserves and global economic conditions. Currently, in the international market, the dollar is having a strong output as against trading in China and all global factors put in place. And also, people are anticipating that the election in the US is going to have a ripple effect on a lot of African economies, considering our debt stock. But the good news is that most African countries are now having the potential to repay their debt. Nonetheless, there's been a lot of restructuring of debt in most African countries. Ghana is not left out. We saw haircuts happening through our domestic debt exchange program. The finance minister is currently negotiating with external Eurobond holders and trying as much as possible to push repayment date forward. Whether he will be able to do that before the election is something many have projected that it will be quite difficult, considering the high risk profile of Ghana and how we are standing now. But still, all these take into consideration whether our CD will have enough forex reserves to stay stable just after the election, going to the X months period where trading activities are happening. It has become difficult. External factors such as global commodity prices and also cocoa reserves will all come into play going forward into the next year. But I project that the cedi will still see marginal depreciation, even though the depreciation has slowed down a bit. But still, there will be marginal depreciation in the currency going forward into the next quarter.
Now, you mentioned the Christmas period is a big election, coming up December the 7th. Vice President Bawumia, who of course is standing in to run for the presidential position for the ruling party, he's made a number of promises, 6% GDP growth. He wants to boost the agricultural sector, mining and so on. What do you make of the promises that he's making? Are they realistic?
Vice President Bawumia's promises, like any other political pledges, all of them need to be scrutinized for feasibility. His promises often focus on economic reforms. He's emphasized consistently as the father of digitalization and also infrastructure development. While these goals are ambitious and aligned with Ghana's long-term development needs, their realism would depend on the country's fiscal capacity, political will, and effective implementation of these policies. And given the current economic challenges, achieving these promises will require robust policy frameworks and sustained effort. He's also promised a flat rate for businesses, especially those who are engaged in huge export and import. He's also promised tax amnesty for first-time business owners and also amnesty for businesses for a whole year, so that those who are not tax compliant will have the payback to return back to the tax bracket. Nonetheless, all these promises need a lot of work. We need to revise the tax structure to bring people, the informal sector, back onto the tax basket. All these tax net and policies are needed. Nonetheless, there has been conversation about a lot of about taxation of businesses, which has necessarily been pushed down to consumers. So the normal price of goods and services has become quite expensive. The living conditions of Ghanaians have become quite difficult, and that has become a key political topic for the opposition party, the NDC, using against the current government. So the debate has now been that since the government in power, which is led by Dr. Bawumia, he's also standing for position after he was the vice president for Nana Akufo-Addo. The case is, if the party is still in power, why have they not done this key policy initiative that he's proposing? Why does he have to wait for him to be in power, since it is the same government, the same party in power? Why all this? Why the opposition is also using as an advantage to push the current incumbent that indeed you have failed in terms of economy, you have failed in terms of putting in structures to alleviate the economic conditions of the individuals in the country, the high tax rates, high import rate, high interest rate in the market. All of these have become a weapon in the hand of the opposition, which are realistic, because if you go to the market, importers, business owners, traders all have the same sentiments. But as to whether the government is in sync with the reality on the ground, I doubt much has been done, even though certain sectors have been handled, especially the government has invested hugely on the health sector, which most of the projects have not been completed through their Agenda 111, which is to ensure there are over 101 district hospitals across the country.
Now, what do you make? Let's get to cocoa now. The cocoa board is seeking a price hike, about 65% to pay to farmers. What do you make of that that plan there, that intention to raise those cocoa prices?
For me, I think it has been long overdue, where the current cocoa farmers who are now more inclined, they've been farming for several years, and they've realized that the current price boost in the international market, where cocoa is now selling at about over $7,000 for them to experience this marginal increment, where if you look at the last season, 2023-2024 season, cocoa was selling at 33,120 Ghana cedis per ton. With the increment of 45%, cocoa farmers are now going to be receiving about 48,000 Ghana cedis per ton. That is between the 2024-2025 season. For the 45% increment going into the 2025 season is a very enormous target by the cocoa board, and it is needed because it has come to light that most of the cocoa farmers are now shifting away from cocoa farming and giving their lands out to galamsey operations. And that has contributed to a shortfall in our revenue, which initially in 2023, Ghana was making an amount of 1.39 billion US dollars in cocoa compared to what we have made in 2024 so far, which is around $760 million. So we're making 1.6 billion then in 2023, but compared to the current period, we have experienced a shortfall of about 760 million, which is huge. And looking at how much cocoa contributes to our economic growth has become difficult. If we have to move into the 2024-2025 season, there's a need for the cocoa board to be decisive, to be strategic, to ensure that the smuggling issues are dealt with, to ensure that the farmers receive the right chemicals, fertilizers, the farmers are given the right training conditions, to ensure that they do not find galamsey operation more advantageous compared to cocoa farming. Cocoa farming can be made sustainable looking at how many years a farmland can be used to make a huge amount of money. Nonetheless, the differences, especially from the farm gate price to the world market price, the difference is around 4,864 US dollars. If cocoa board is able to bring the gap down where the farmers receive more in the cocoa value chain pricing, there will be enough confidence for them to still sell to government instead of smuggling and be selling to foreign governments, basically.
Very quickly, do you think Ivory Coast will do the same? Because if Ivory Coast doesn't hike prices, then couldn't there be some distortion there?
Ivory Coast have maintained their position over the years, and if you look at how they strategize and position their cocoa industry, it has sustained their output over the years. There's a whole cocoa strategic plan, and they've decided to abide by it. If they decide to increase their prices, it's going to affect Ghana's markets going into the next season, because already the syndicated loan from our angle, the prospect for syndicated loan seems to have fallen away, where Cocoa Board has decided that they will be embarked on self-financing going into the next season. And that announcement was rebacked by the finance minister and also the agri minister, who came back at Cocoa Board saying that indeed, if you decide to self-financing, there will still be a synchronized financing where we'll give you self-financing, government financing, and still go for some syndicated form of financing from the international market. But the risks being associated with it is whether our current cocoa pricing compared to the new laws by the European Union, where the EPA and also all this coming to light, it has become quite difficult for Ghana to prospect going forward into the next season. But if Cote d'Ivoire decide to increase the prices, it's going to affect the cocoa dynamics going into the next season, especially where farmers will find it quite necessary. If they reduce their prices, farmers will find it necessary to sell to Ghana, especially to the produce buying companies, if the needs be.
Now, we're looking at Ghana cocoa production. It's been tapering down a bit. Also, we're just also looking at the contraction of 26%. So what's your outlook? I mean, are you hopeful that that trajectory will change as far as the cocoa production and that contraction we saw is concerned?
We struggle to even meet the target of 850,000 metric tons in 2023, and even the last season. If we are to see an increment based on the current structure of Cocoa Board is currently in huge debt. The management structure, unless there is a new dynamic from the management of our cocoa in Ghana, I perceive that with this announcement of farm gate prices, it's going to give a new optimism in cocoa farmers associations in the country. Already, they have consistently been advocating for fair pricing of their cocoa produce. And I have had interaction with some of the farmers, and they've told me that indeed this announcement gives them a little bit of hope. Nonetheless, some also are against the pricing, saying that looking at the margin differences, they will still stick to not necessarily sell to the cocoa board, but they will find international buyers and sell directly to them in order to make up for their investment in their cocoa farms. Nonetheless, there has to be the case of nationality. There has to be the case of patriotism. There has to be the case of argument about profitability. What has cocoa board done to benefit from these farmers? If you look at the number of years it takes for a farmer to be quite prudent, especially in terms of how much they make of invested in their farm production and how many hectares and acres of land they are investing and whether these farming practices have been sustainable, it comes to light that indeed there's more work to be done. Galamsey has been a huge contributor in recording this shortfall in most of our cocoa produce in strategic areas. If you look at the Google Earth, it shows you that indeed these areas are key cocoa producing areas and they contribute enormously to our overall outlook. And we've been losing so much, especially in how our prospect could be. This should have been our best year so far in the cocoa season, considering how many years Ghana has been in the industry and playing a key role in overall cocoa supply in two manufacturing sectors across the world.
Winston Tackie, business journalist. Thank you. Business analyst and journalist. Thank you so much for your time.